Melanie Stansbury, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Thomas Massey are not names you expect to hear in the same breath. But when their worlds collide inside Congress, something unmistakable happens. A crack in the silence that has surrounded one of the most notorious cases of our time. And what unfolded in that hearing room wasn't political theater, wasn't a stunt, and wasn't a distraction. It was a moment when decades of secrets, sealed files, and unanswered questions finally brushed against the light. Because when new Epstein documents landed in Congress, thousands of pages of emails, financial transfers, sworn statements, and internal records, the story shifted.
Now recognizes, we got a number here. Representative Stansbury. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to testify here in the Judiciary Committee. It's an honor to be here to discuss a case that is as serious as it is urgent, and that is the ongoing congressional inquiry into the Jeffrey Epstein case and the failures of the criminal justice system to hold powerful individuals accountable. I want to acknowledge that this committee has taken some significant steps to advance the discharge petition demanding that the administration release the files, and I want to bring some additional materials here today from the Oversight Committee on which I serve, because so many of the issues at play in this case are within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, including the miscarriage of justice that was conducted within the courts, the Department of Justice, law enforcement agencies that failed survivors for decades. So let me begin with this. This is not a partisan issue. Sexual violence is not a partisan issue. Justice for survivors is not a partisan issue. And the pursuit of truth, transparency, and accountability is not a partisan issue. It is essential to restoring trust in our institutions, especially when powerful individuals, whoever they are, have engaged in criminal misconduct and escaped scrutiny and prosecution. The Oversight Committee's work is focused on 3 central questions. What powerful individuals were engaged in criminal behavior? Why did the justice system repeatedly fail women and girls who were groomed, raped, trafficked, and abused? And were individuals with significant influence shielded from proper investigation and accountability? And how do we pursue justice today? Questions that are surely within the clear jurisdiction and interest of this committee. In recent weeks, pursuant to a subpoena, the Oversight Committee has received tens of thousands of documents from the Epstein estate, including more than 1,600 references to the current president. These include emails, correspondence, financial records, litigation documents, and statements attributed to Epstein himself. I want to be clear, these documents contain allegations including sworn statements that must be evaluated through a full, transparent, investigative lens and process. And this is precisely why releasing the full, unredacted Epstein files is essential, and why this public inquiry is also essential. Among the materials I will reference are a sexual assault case in which Donald Trump appears to have been subpoenaed, served, and deposed, sworn statements involving a then 16-year-old who was recruited at Mar-a-Lago, who alleged that she was groomed and assaulted by Epstein and others, including those with significant global influence, emails and correspondence in which Epstein states that Trump knew about the girls and that minors were being recruited from Mar-a-Lago, that Trump was present at Epstein's residence on numerous occasions, and that Epstein possessed photographs of Trump with young girls, and that Trump was, quote, the dog that hadn't barked, a phrase that Epstein used to suggest Trump's potential silence to police. The documents also reference financial transfers between Epstein and Trump, discussion of Trump's business affairs, and concerns about potential money laundering through real estate transactions, all matters that may or may not have criminal significance and clearly warrant investigation. Additionally, we have documents from the Epstein estate in which Epstein himself assessed that he faced a mandatory minimum of at least 10 years in prison, yet the Justice Department declined to prosecute him under federal law despite recommendations from his own line prosecutor. And these statements appear to directly conflict with sworn testimony that the Oversight Committee received from U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta just a few months ago when he claimed that credible evidence to pursue federal charges was not there. Together, these materials are a substantial body of evidence, and it is evidence that the American people deserve and demand to see. Justice matters because those who abused, enabled, financed, and protected this criminal enterprise must face the truth and must face consequences. And transparency is essential for healing and restoring confidence in the rule of the law, and it is essential because Congress has a responsibility to ensure that our justice system protects victims, not perpetrators. And that includes strengthening victims' rights legislation that will likely move through this very committee. And so part of why I am here today is to advocate to please take the partisanship out of this case. Please address the facts as you see them before you. Please join us in this investigation, and please help us hold these people accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate you sharing today. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
For the first time in years, the people holding the power to expose the truth were forced to confront what had been ignored for far too long. The real shock wasn't that new material had been delivered. It was that someone inside the room, Representative Melanie Stansbury, stood up and refused to let the old pattern repeat. No dodging, no euphemisms, no carefully scripted talking points designed to neutralize public outrage. She told the committee what the American people have spent years demanding to know, that these documents contain allegations, references, and claims involving individuals who have long been considered beyond reach. And she said it in a way that few lawmakers ever dare to, direct, grounded, and without fear of who might be implicated once the full truth emerges. From her opening words, Stansbury framed the issue in a way Congress almost never does. She dismantled the idea that justice is a partisan pursuit. She reminded the room, and the country, that the failures in the Epstein case weren't blue or red. They were systemic, institutional, long-standing, and deeply rooted in a culture where influence shields the powerful while victims are pushed aside. She emphasized that survivors weren't just failed once, but repeatedly, across agencies, courts, and departments that were supposed to protect them. And she refused to allow the discussion to drift back into political scorekeeping, because the weight of the evidence she carried demanded more than that. It wasn't just her tone that captured the moment. It was what she brought with her: tens of thousands of new documents received under subpoena. Records that weren't rumors or internet speculation, but materials from the Epstein estate. Emails, correspondence, financial ledgers, legal filings, and statements directly attributed to Epstein himself. Materials that referenced influential individuals over 1,600 times. Materials that pointed to connections the justice system never fully confronted. Materials that raised questions about who knew what, who participated, who looked the other way, and who may have been protected. But the most explosive part wasn't a single document. It was the pattern that emerged when these pieces were laid side by side. Because within the records were sworn statements describing a then 16-year-old allegedly recruited at a private club. Statements claiming that powerful individuals were present at locations where minors were groomed. Emails suggesting that certain high-profile figures knew about the girls, according to what Epstein himself reportedly wrote. Conversations referencing photographs in Epstein's possession. Discussions about financial transfers. Mentions of real estate deals that raised speculation about potential laundering or concealed transactions. None of it presented as definitive guilt. Stansbury herself stressed that these were allegations, claims, and sworn accounts that require investigation. But taken together, they formed a body of evidence that should have triggered action long ago. And that's where her challenge to Congress hit hardest. Because she didn't just focus on individuals. She focused on the system that let this happen in the first place. She reminded the committee that federal prosecutors had once recommended charges for Epstein that could have carried a mandatory minimum decade-long sentence. She pointed out that internal documents show Epstein himself believed he would face at least 10 years if his case went forward under federal law. Yet the Department of Justice declined to prosecute. Not because evidence was lacking, as internal recommendations and estate materials indicate, but for reasons never fully explained. And those reasons, she implied, may be intertwined with influence, connections, and pressure that have never been scrutinized. This wasn't speculation. It was a direct contradiction between what the Oversight Committee uncovered and what officials previously testified. When former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta stated there was no credible evidence for federal charges, that testimony contrasted sharply with the new materials Congress had received. And when a contradiction surfaces at this level of power, it raises a single unavoidable question. If the justice system backed away from prosecuting Epstein, was the decision based on evidence or on the identities of those who might be exposed in the process? That question has hovered over this case for decades. It has fueled public outrage, online speculation, and endless rumors. But for the first time, Congress was not just hearing theories. They had the documents. They had the statements. They had the inconsistencies laid bare. And as Stansbury made clear, the public deserves to know exactly what is in those files. Not selectively, not strategically, not with names blacked out. Completely. Fully. Without redactions that hide the most important parts. And this is where figures like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel enter the conversation. Bondi, now serving in a leadership role that shapes how information flows through the justice system, has faced growing pressure to release unredacted Epstein materials. Patel, as a senior law enforcement figure, has been questioned repeatedly about what the FBI found, what they cataloged, and what remains shielded from the public. Their roles matter because transparency depends on the willingness of those in power to cooperate with congressional oversight instead of stonewalling it. And when the American people see hesitation, delays, or vague answers, the suspicion only grows. Thomas Massie also plays an unexpected role. His push for the full release of these files has made him one of the few lawmakers willing to cross political lines on this issue. Massie's insistence that the public must see everything, without exception, has forced the conversation beyond party boundaries. Meanwhile, figures like Dan Goldman have raised questions about procedural inconsistencies, investigative failures, and government accountability in the handling of the case. Their combined presence signals something rare in Congress, a moment where individuals from different political wings are acknowledging the same problem and demanding answers. But Stansbury's point was bigger than any one official. She argued that transparency itself is the foundation of justice. Without the full release of these files, survivors remain in the dark about the truth of what happened to them. The public is forced to speculate, and the institutions that allowed these failures remain unchallenged. She reminded Congress that the justice system should protect victims, not the powerful individuals who manipulated, groomed, or exploited them, and that repairing this broken trust requires not just words, but action. She also stressed something deeper, that the public has reached a breaking point. People are tired of secrecy, tired of seeing government agencies redact pages of documents into black rectangles while telling the country that transparency is a priority. Tired of watching powerful individuals escape scrutiny because of their wealth, influence, or connections. And tired of hearing promises of accountability that never materialize. In that moment, she wasn't speaking as a politician. She was speaking as someone who recognized that the credibility of the justice system itself is on the line, and she wasn't wrong. Every time survivors are told to wait, every time files are kept sealed, every time the public is expected to accept a curated version of the truth, trust erodes. And without trust, institutions cannot function. Stansbury's message was simple. Survivors deserve the truth, the public deserves the truth, and Congress has a responsibility to deliver it. What made her testimony so striking wasn't only what she said, it was the way she said it. Calm, direct, unflinching. She didn't sensationalize the material. She didn't make accusations without framing them as allegations. She didn't use the moment for political advantage. Instead, she cut through decades of confusion with the clarity the public has been waiting for. And in doing so, she put every member of that committee on notice. The demand for transparency will not fade. The documents exist. The evidence exists. And the pressure to release them fully and publicly is only increasing. The hearing ended, but the echo of her words did not. Because she asked Congress, and by extension, the entire system, a question that cannot be ignored. If justice is supposed to apply equally, then why has this case been treated differently from every other case involving crimes against minors? Why were certain names protected? Why did agencies fail to act? And who will be held accountable for allowing this to continue? She challenged lawmakers. Put aside politics, put aside party loyalties, put aside the fear of who might be exposed, and stand on the side of survivors. Stand on the side of truth. Stand on the side of justice. She reminded them that powerful individuals walking away untouched while victims live with lifelong consequences is not justice. It is betrayal. And if Congress wants to rebuild credibility, it must choose transparency over convenience. The path forward is clear. Release the files. Release them unredacted. Allow the public to see what the system never wanted to face. Because until that happens, the shadow of the Epstein case will continue to haunt every institution that failed to confront it. If you believe the truth should not be hidden behind black bars, if you believe justice shouldn't depend on status or influence, and if you want to keep following every update as Congress digs deeper into these documents, make sure you subscribe, stay tuned, and keep pushing for full transparency. The only way the truth comes out is if we demand it.